Okay. First off, I am Randy. I've been working here at Jonathan Dickinson as a volunteer ever since the Kimbell Center opened, almost 15 years plus now. Ooh. And of course, just recently, they doubled my pay. So as a volunteer, I get nothing, and 2 times nothing is still nothing. So, oh well. And today joining us, we have a new ranger in the park, is Kara Pert. She actually comes from a couple other state parks. She's not brand new to this, as well as national parks too, correct?
Yep.
What were some of the national parks, or a national park?
A national park might be one you all have heard of, I don't know. It's called just a little one called Yellowstone.
Yellowstone, yeah. The largest national park in...
Nope.
No?
Not even close to being the largest.
What is?
The largest is Wrangell St. Elias in Alaska. It's,
Okay.
I think 3 times the size of Yellowstone.
Whew. That's big. That's big. Anyhow, today's program is, of course, what's called the Scavenger Hunt. And there is, of course, I'm going to pass out to each of you. You're supposed to try and find these things, which typically what I do with this program. This is passed out to the kids. The adults, I do also, while I'm giving the program, I'm also going to, this is called what's called the river walk or scavenger hunt. I also do the same thing, the river tour. So in fact, I'm going to do the river walk also today. So you're going to hear about the history of the park, a little bit of history of the river as well, and why certain things are actually done in this park. Because a lot of people don't understand why we do prescribed burns, particularly, or a lot about the animals that are particularly in the area that we're going to, which is actually called Pine Flatwoods on that. Let me pass out to each of you. And of course, if you have problems finding anything, believe me, I will actually go over and point out a number of these things. We're going to go out the back door here and get started.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Now, of course, the whole back area, like I said, is the Pine Flatwoods. We have a number of things that we'll actually see, and we're going to make multiple stops as we go along. The whole hike is not much more than a little over a quarter of a mile. Any idea what this is?
Maple, something?
Excuse me?
Some kind of maple?
That is what almost everyone guesses when they first see it. If you just look out, you'll see actually a number of these growing. The Indians actually named it because it looks like a turkey footprint. This is a turkey oak. It is the only oak in Florida that as soon as we get our first cold wave, starts turning yellow, red, brown, and then the leaves fall off. But Florida is very wealthy in our oak population. We have almost 30 different varieties of oaks. This is a live oak. You can tell by the rounded leaf. This is a scrub oak, the fine, very narrow leaf. And then there is a laurel oak, which is right around here somewhere. Back in the back there. It looks like a deformed leaf, basically. So here, in less than a 5-foot diameter, I've already shown you 4 oaks. Not too unusual, needless to say. And one of the things on your scavenger hunt is an oak tree. So I've shown you, actually, this is a tree. This would grow into a tree. The scrub oak, that's one of our indicators for fire. If it gets to be about shoulder height, it's time to burn. Actually, those are meant to be a low bush more than anything. Baby deer. A lot of times animals have better sense of smell, hearing, and sight usually than we do. Everyone always goes, well, I went out on a hike and I didn't see any animals. Why? Because they saw and heard you first. And they, got out of the way, basically. Although a lot of times we do see a lot of different animals. Yep, he's in there. One of our inhabitants. This is a Gopher Tortoise hole. You can't get to where, I can't have you step on the apron here. That is where they lay their eggs. You would think they would lay them inside the burrow, but in fact, they lay them out on the apron, which makes them fair game to raccoons, unfortunately. Now, a lot of people, as you notice, you can see all this was burnt fairly recently. Any guess how long ago this burned?
2 years.
Excuse me?
2 years.
6 months?
You're closer. It's about 2 months ago
Wow.
this burned. Florida was meant to burn. It recovers very quickly, and the reason it burned, of course, we are the lightning capital of the world. Florida, before you and I came along, burned from coast to coast every 1 to 3 years. A lot of people don't realize that. And of course, lightning is something you got to really be careful of. Here, Florida has actually grown to where it needs to burn. If the ground gets too crowded with leaves and everything like that, in fact, what happens is this doesn't grow. One of the things. This is what's called wiregrass. That's what that guy eats. Also, deer eat it. And if we go into the food chain, who eats the deer? The panther. So, of course, if we don't feed the deer, the panther will leave also. Of course, back in 1941, we had an individual come along that said, only you can prevent forest fires. Who was that?
Smokey Bear.
Smokey the Bear, the worst thing that could ever happen to the ecology anywhere. So we stopped all fires. 1941, we didn't have counts as far as panther goes, but there was more turkey and deer than you could shake a stick at in Florida. I mean, it was just really lousy with both. By 1970, there was fewer than 50 panthers in the state of Florida. Both turkey and deer were thought to be extinct. Then we had a lightning strike in one of the state parks here in Florida, and in fact burnt over 8,000 acres in one day. Of course, they had all the scientists and biologists came in, And they looked at the park and said, well, it'll be a decade before this park will recover and people will start coming to the park. In fact, less than 10 days, almost everything was green again. All the grasses were growing, everything like that. And in 2 weeks, they started seeing deer again. Son of a gun. So the biologists thought, hey, maybe there's something to this, and they started actually doing prescribed burns. Now there are indicators that tell us when to burn, depending on where you are in the park. Up front, we have in the Upland Sandhill Scrub, yes, the sand fleas are out with a vengeance right now. I see you all scratching. Typically, that area has what's called scrub jays in it. Again, an endangered species, looks like a blue jay on steroids. It's very large. They are ground dwellers. They can fly, but they prefer to basically stay to the ground. They will fly if threatened, anything like that. They do, of course, stay in their family group. They are extremely family oriented. Well, we do a number of scrub jay countings in this park, in the front of it, and the way we do that, we recruit usually kids, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, things like that, to come in and help us, but we get a lot of adults that want to help us also. What we do is we go out in areas where we know different family groups are, and they're banded, so we know which family they belong to. We take and go out there, we play a boombox with their mating call. You hold your arms out, they land on you. They are not afraid of people, they land on you, and that's how we count them. So that's why we recruit people all the time to help us count the actual scrub jays that we have in the park. When the family group starts to diminish, it means too much fuel is on the floor. They can't find the bugs and everything, and they're starting to spread out. So that means it's time to burn that area. Everyone thinks animals are stupid. When there is a fire, how you doing today? When there's a fire, everyone thinks, well, you know, snakes, frogs, rabbits, a lot of them cannot outrun the fire. Yes, the deer, the coyotes, everything, the larger animals can outrun fire or run to where it's not and be safe. But the smaller animals can't. All the animals declare a truce. They know where the different gopher tortoise holes are, and they go in there. During burns, we have accidentally caved in a couple of them. Actually, this is when I was at Atlantic Ridge Preserve. So, of course, we're out there with shovels digging to open it up again, and had over 400 animals come out of that hole. Now, the animals are smart. They declare a truce. You will have a rattlesnake sitting right next to a rat. It's normal food, but he will not bother that rat till the fire passes and they all come out. How unusual is that? Now, it's easy for me to find the gopher tortoise hole. Number one, typically you're going to see some white sand in this area. Look for the wiregrass, but more than that, this is what's called a gopher apple. It's an apple about this big, looks like a Granny Smith yellow apple when it actually ripens. And of course, it grows close to the ground because gopher tortoises can't jump very well. And that's what they typically eat. And of course, the seeds from it, when he goes to the bathroom, you'll always find the gopher apple all around where his hole is. So they're they give away their location. all of the pine trees. Of course, this is what's called a slash pine. Notice it carries the crown very high in the air. That is because fire, so fire doesn't affect it. When fire starts and starts burning the bark around it, the tree naturally flakes off the bark to keep the tree cool so fire doesn't affect it. Son of a gun. That's one of the things that it has evolved so that fire really doesn't bother it, which is a good thing. And of course, all of the low brush, that just starts growing back, the root source. There is a number of things. One of the things that I give in the park is also a survival class. A lot of people don't realize there is tons of things in the park that you can actually eat all over the place. This, of course, and you see a lot of these, this is what's called a saw palmetto, mainly because the shaft has a ton of spikes on it. If you walk into it, it'll draw blood real quickly. Now, if you dig up the root and peel it, boil it, tastes just like potatoes. It's actually better for you than a potato is. And in fact, to this day, if you go to Lake Wales, Bud and Mary's, they have every Friday catfish and what they call swamp cabbage, all you can eat.
So that's swamp cabbage.
Same thing, yes. Son of a gun. Now, it takes, you'll see some of these with the root, actually, or the stem of it coming out. These grow like 1/10 of an inch per year. What you'll notice is a lot of and I'll point out some of them, most of these palm fronds that you see here, saw palmetto, are over 10,000 years old. People don't realize, the growth rate, everything like that of them. Here's one of our thing, and it's all over the place. This little plant right here, and it just grows wild. There was a ton of it we passed already. Any idea what that is?
Snowberry?
Huh?
Snowberry?
Well, you're close. It's Florida blueberries.
Okay.
They are, fairly small. Twice a year, they come into season, of course, and you got to be quick to beat the deer to it, because the deer will, needless to say, get them if you're not quick. Every year I come here with a little, 1 gallon bucket, and there's the white trail around that has millions of these things. And you can walk the 3-mile section and fill up a couple buckets real easily. So we're talking blueberry cobbler, blueberry pies, blueberries on top of your cereal, all kinds of goodies like that. The river. This is the Loxahatchee River. It is the second oldest river in the United States. Any idea what the oldest river is called and where it is?
Mississippi or the Hood?
Nope. It's called the New River. Go figure. It runs through North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia. In fact, Deliverance, the movie with Burt Reynolds, our local star, was filmed on the New River in the Virginia area. One thing that all very old rivers have in common, they all flow backwards. This flows from south to north. All new rivers being 50,000 years or newer, flow from north to south. This one is a few million years old and of course flows from south to north. Starts down in West Palm Beach and comes up into Martin County here before going out at the Jupiter Inlet. And of course the Jupiter Inlet was not permanently open until 1941. They'd open it for the snowbirds that lived on Jupiter Island, but not until 1941 did they permanently open the Jupiter Inlet. Before that, and we have photos in the Kimbell Education Center of the Loxahatchee. That is all mangroves out there. They have it with nothing but the cabbage palm and also cypress all over the place. There were no mangroves because it takes brackish water for the mangroves to actually start growing. They can grow in fresh water though. This is what's called a Sable Palm. It comes down to a point where the other one goes straight across. Have you ever eaten hearts of palm? You can buy it at Publix in a jar or a can. It is actually, they strip down a ways from there and actually remove the real young shoots, what they call the heart of the palm. They'll pickle it or boil it. There's a number of things you can do. Again, very good. And it's easy to tell the difference between, the cabbage palm or sable palm because this comes to a point. Same with that, but yet you get further over. Also, if you were a Boy Scout, you know that in the cabbage palm, all of this is what we call monkey fur. And it's used if you're out trying to survive. You grab a bunch of this, put it down, and with a striker, it will ignite immediately. This is real good for starting a fire. And how it got the name of monkey fur, I'll never know, but that's what it is. We are slowly but surely working on this. This is a new addition to the park. The whole thing is so that during this time of year, winter time, when it's cooler, everything like that, I can actually do programs out here during nighttime or daytime. It is going to have a screen coming down and a projector like we have at the Kimbell Center as well, and an area up here for me to hook up a computer to it and be able to give different presentations. One thing that's odd for really the state of Florida, if you have something like this built, of course you must pull a permit to have it built. If the Seminole Indians, you contract the Seminole Indians to do it, there is no permit required. I can't explain that one, but that is the rule. This, of course, was done by the Seminole Indians, and in fact, it's already gone through a hurricane. Believe me, there is a ton of things that has to go on. Further in the area over there, you can't see it in the far west side, there's a black Bat Condo. It holds between 2,500 and 3,500 bats. Bats eat their own weight in mosquitoes every night. So needless to say, they're very good to have around. That was my son's eagle project. Almost everything in the park, except for this and a few other things, are in fact eagle projects. All of these benches were an eagle project. So it was for Boy Scouts to come in and do to actually get to be an eagle in Boy Scouts. A lot of people don't realize once you eagle from Boy Scouts, there is a lot of different benefits, and that's why Girl Scouts wanted to merge with Boy Scouts. Okay, let's continue. The other thing about an old river, you notice it's very windy. The older they get, the more, those are called oxbows. Actually, it gets very windy. Again, all over the place, blueberry. We also have wild blackberries that grow.
Wow.
This, of course, many years ago, they say this tree is over 200 years old. The reason it didn't die when they originally opened up the inlet, and this was brackish, the taproot goes down into fresh water. This only died a year ago. So, of course, all the roots were exposed, and one of the things, Mother Nature, adapting to its environment, you notice the roots had started getting bark on them as well. And what is the bark for? It protects it from insects and everything. And of course, it kept, as the river got older and more windy and erosion from rain, it exposed more and more. Now, of course, what a lot of people don't realize is this white sand. If you look at it real closely, it's nothing but crushed quartz. Florida is actually after the actual coral bed that we have. This is the Appalachian Mountains. The Appalachian Mountains used to be much taller than your Rocky Mountains, but they're much older, many millions of years older than the Rocky Mountains are. Of course, they eroded, washed down the river, came out into the ocean. The ocean washed it down here and deposited in Florida. Now, also, if you notice, in a number of places in the park, have you seen the orange sand that we have here? You've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it. Okay. Typically, where you'll see it a lot of times is sometimes the gopher tortoises will run into a vein. If you could actually take and put a big thing in the sand and move it apart, you would see actual lines of that orange sand. That orange sand is from the Sahara Desert. Every time a hurricane came through. So like the rings of a tree, to give you the age, we can date by pulling that off. We can actually date when every major hurricane came through Florida, because it deposited that orange sand from the Sahara Desert. This one, of course, just passed away. There's one right up here that in fact is alive. Totally out in the water. And yet thriving. Okay, just 1 second, let me grab. These are indigenous. They're a red, like bean, with a black dot on them. Come on, get in there. They're called Rosary Pea. is what they're known as. If you put one in your mouth and chew it, you will die. They're that poisonous. The Indians from previously, what a lot of people don't realize, in Jonathan Dickinson State Park, we have 5,000-year-old Indian burial mounds in this park of the Hobe and Jaga Indians. Everyone thinks it was the Seminoles. No, they were here long before the Seminoles. Seminoles actually started in upstate New York, and when their tribe and also the Blackfoot grew too many people, there was a war. The Indians knew that it took so many people for so many acres to survive. When there got to be too many, there was a war between both of them, and they ran them out. Well, the Seminoles moved south. They came down into the Carolinas. Then the Cherokee Indians ran them out of there, and they kept coming south until they ended up down here in Florida, primarily the Everglades, to, where no one wanted to run them out until the Americans, actually the Trail of Tears, I'm sure some of you may have heard of that, when they tried to gather up, they wanted to take all the Indian land is what they wanted to do, because the Indians were here first, but that was what the white man did, not exactly the best thing to do. Anyway, they'd grind this up and put it on their spears and things like that, so that even if they nicked you with it, you were gonna die. They didn't do that when they were hunting, of course, because you don't want to eat your food and then die. It is indigenous, it grows, wild here. What I'm looking for is sensitivine. I'll come across some here before long. We have a couple different plants that grow wild also. Sensitivine is in the Venus flytrap family, and in fact you touch the leaves and they fold in. It's not carnivorous. We do have the pink dewdrop that grows wild. Looks like it has morning dew all over it. Low, it grows real low to the ground, pink, very pretty, everything like that. The bugs go down because it's a very sweet nectar, but it's also like super glue. It immediately catches them. They get stuck in that, what looks like dew, and then they secrete a liquid that digests the bug. They are a carnivorous plant that lives here in the park. And on the Florida trail that you were on, the Ocean to Lake Trail, that's our orange trail. Actually, there is a number of those, and I always point those out, as well as there's only one other place in the world that it grows, the ghost orchid. Very small, little orchid, thought to be extinct. We have a bunch of them here. Okay, everyone loves going where we're going next. We're just going to go about 100 feet, and what you're going to see is everything is going to change. You have, the plant life, everything that you see here in the next 100 feet is going to change. Summertime gets almost 10 degrees cooler also. Okay, this is what's called a tidal swamp. And in fact, you can see at high tide where the water actually comes up to. There are areas further up that in fact are awash during high tide. The holes that you see around, they've been doing trail maintenance, so you can see they've cut a lot of things, but the holes that you see are a red land crab. That was a delicacy to the Indians. They used to come down here and catch them all the time. Of course, also what we have, and they have a development in Miami named for this, this is Coco Plum. And in fact, it has a plum on it, and it is, of course, very edible. The Indians used to make, again, a jelly and jam out of it. They used to carry them in a sack as well. We also have, you can't see it from here, but there is what's called a pond apple. Full size, same as a Granny Smith yellow apple. Quite nice. Yep. You stand still long enough, they'll come out. And that's what the Indians would do, is they'd stand still. Oh, they're big.
My English is no good, man. You speak slowly and very well.
Thank you. Because I used to stutter. I went to a speech therapist for many years. But if we went further, when I do the actual river walk, this at low tide, and it is not low tide right now, you can actually walk around this island, come out the other way. You would see a lot of live cypress, as well as cypress that, because of the saltwater intrusion, have in fact died. We'll go on the other section of the trail, and I'll actually show you some of the cypress there. Typically in this area, what lives here, on the other side, we have a barn owl, not to be confused with a barred owl. Barred owls are normally about this tall. Barn owls are this tall. Barn owl is the only owl, bird of prey, that can run a bald eagle out of its nest. Owls are lazy. They will take over the eagle or osprey nest. They are much stronger. An eagle, when it swoops down and hits its prey with its talons, is a little over 150 pounds per square inch. A barn owl is over 350 pounds per square inch, and they can have 6 to 8 foot wingspan. We have a female that lives on the other side, and every so often we'll see bones from she got a raccoon or, you know, a number of things that were prowling in her area. They are magnificent birds, but we see a lot of barn and barred owls. When I take people out on the 2.5-day hike, both of our outbound primitive camps have a lot of both in that area. And of course, while we're sitting there at nighttime, I point out, you know, the different calls that you'll hear, as well as the coyotes and everything else.
Excuse me?
Yes.
This?
What is this tree? Some sort of palm tree.
Okay, that is actually goes around, that's around a cabbage palm, so it is actually growing around it, and that is, it'll come to me. What?
Strangler fig.
Right.
It's strangling the cabbage palm.
The cabbage palm.
The sable,
No,
yes.
it's not down. It's
They grow from the top down. The birds eat the berries and leave the berries at the top. And it grows downward and strangles the tree.
Oh.
A vicious bush. Of course, there is back there also the one that is dead that goes up fairly tall. That is a cypress there.
L'oiseau laisse les semences sur notre top, puis là, ça fait sa croissance jusqu'au sol, autour de l'arbre, puis là, il va faire le tremblé.
Okay, and this is our sensa vine. Lots of thorns on it, so you have to be careful. But if you touch the leaf, it folds up immediately.
Sensitive.
Why? To expose the thorns more so that any animal brushing up against it will in fact rip off a section of that vine. And what happens is it carries it to another place and replants. They are starting to have the Coco Plums. You can see them starting to come out. Well, I hate to say it, but the birds have really gotten it and the others aren't totally ripe. But if someone wanted to be brave and bite it, you're more than welcome to.
Kind of like lychee. A little bit like lychee. And it's not super sweet, but a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Where the trail comes around, when you come around the island, here's where you exit. We're going to just go a little ways down here. Again, notice all the ferns and everything that you don't have 100 feet, further up. I would be willing to bet it's coming to a high tide now. And of course, here is one of our live cypress. Why it is so old that in fact its taproot again goes into fresh water. So the brackish water isn't affecting it. Of course, here's all what's called Cypress Knees. Any idea what purpose the Cypress Knees serve?
Breathing.
To breathe, exactly. Also, if you're out in this area camping, make sure you set up your tent above the cypress knee, because that's telling you that's high water on that. We have a number of, out here you'll see some really large, and actually the barn owl's nest is in one of these big cypress. And again, this is another real old guy. Of course, all of our cypress in South Florida is what's called bald cypress. After the first cold wave, they lose all their leaves. Everyone will think they're dead, but of course, come spring, they will again get all their leaves back. And there is a number as we keep going. And I will say, you can see light over that way. I can see yellow. That's water over there. That's the river. We're that close to the river already. And this only goes a little bit further before, and it's up to y'all. Do you want to go the rest of the way?
Sure.
Okay, I'm game. Now you can really see the river. This is, of course, under about this much water at high tide, where we're walking right now. And if you actually sat here and watched for the next 15 minutes, you can see that the tide is coming in.
Randy, I'm gonna go ahead and meet you on the other side.
Okay, I'm not going through, I'm gonna turn around and go back
Oh, okay.
in just a minute.
Oh, you're not gonna go through this?
No.
Oh, okay.
Gets wet in another 50
Right,
feet.
we can't, this is as far as we can go.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were gonna traipse through the water.
Nope,
Okay.
I am not. You can see
Yes,
the
it's
tide
moving.
is coming in.
Wow.
Ah ouais.
It is that fast.
Non.
Bord de la mer, on s'en rend pas compte parce que ça fait des vagues.
Oh, wow.
But normally at low tide, this is all above water. And of course, that all floods over there. It's quite amazing to see that actually come in.
Never seen anything where it's so obvious.
Yeah, no.
The seashore is not with the waves that prevents us
We
to see that.
try to hide all the good stuff that's here in Stewart, you know, the city of Stewart and everything, because otherwise everyone wants to move here. This cypress died probably 70 years ago. Other large cypress, all through here, that have died because of the saltwater intrusion. It is coming in quick.
Sorry, yeah, I thought you were gonna traipse through that.
No.
I only have one pair.
Well, these are waterproof,
That's
but
real time.
it'd
We're gonna be
up to
trapped.
here in no time with the tide the way it is now. Okay, that's small for an owl, but
I've never seen water walking.
you usually find carcasses around here from the owl feeding. What surprises me, she takes on raccoons all the time. rattlebox. From my days of invasive removal, same thing. What you are seeing here, other than the osprey and the, well, no, that's small. That's a red shoulder hawk up there. Is you notice there's a fair amount of dead /pine trees. Everyone goes, there's something wrong that they're dying. No, there is nothing wrong. It is Mother Nature keeping it the way it needs to be. In fact, the Florida forest needs a lot of sunlight to get down to the floor. Very different from like Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, where it is so grown in, no sunlight gets to the floor. We have a lot of vegetation that grows and requires sunlight. What actually happens, and it is a good thing, in that anytime one of those trees are stressed, it's the same as you. When you get stressed, you put out a different odor than you do normally. When they put out the different odor, the pine beetles attack them, eat around the diameter of it, and kill the tree. That's not a bad thing. It thins them out, and it becomes a nest for woodpeckers. A lot of these, if you look, unfortunately we're backlit right now, so it's hard to see, but a lot of these have, particularly the one leaning over there, a number of woodpecker nests in them. Then the woodpeckers are run out by usually the screech owls. Small little owl, only about so big. They'll make the hole a little bit bigger. They live in it. Then the tree will actually topple, and now it's home to fungus and stuff like that, and rattlesnakes, which we have a lot of in this area. The eastern diamondback rattler. It is the largest, most venomous snake in the United States. At birth, the babies have enough venom to kill 2 adult men. So they're not something you want to try and pet, not normally. So in fact, it is a good thing. It thins out the trees, and they do serve a purpose, for nesting, everything like that. So in fact, it is good. Of course, a lot of people look at and always ask me about that orange vine that you see growing. That is what's called the love vine. There is an actual Latin name for it. It does not derive any of its food from the host plant. It's strictly an air plant. And of course, every time we do a burn, all that goes up very quickly. There is, just landed back there, see the red-headed woodpecker? That is actually, I don't know if you can see it, he's way back there. That is one of the, not a regular woodpecker, what's the big one? Kara, do you know? It's called a,
It's a type of woodpecker?
yes, thought to be extinct, and yet we have hundreds of them all over this park. They had a number of biologists. Our biologists just won a rather large award from the governor for the maintenance and everything of this park. Now, of course, this park is very large compared to the other Florida state parks. We are 11,000 acres, which is like 18 and a half miles by 18 and a half miles. Okay.
That's right or wrong, but there seems to be no young pines, only old ones and dead ones.
Actually, the thing is you can't see the new ones growing up. I'll point out some when we get to some, because they may only be like this big, so it's hard to see them in with all of this. And then there, see straight ahead, there's a bunch of young pine
Okay.
right there. And we have two different pine in this area. We actually have the slash pine, the long needle, and we have a sand pine, which is a short needle. Here is a
Okay.
sand pine right here. Back there is a bunch more of the sand pines. The difference is, and Mother Nature really planned this very well. These, the slash pine, 3-4 times a year have pine cones. The pine cones open and they drop all their seeds. This one doesn't have any. But they open, they drop their seeds. They come down like a helicopter, and if there is open ground, they will start growing. Unlike the sand pine, which if you go over to one of those are young, though they're probably only maybe a year old, if that. You go over to the sand pine, they have pine cones on them. They stay closed 3-4 years. Only after we do a burn or there's a fire, it burns the waxy coating off of that, and then 10 days to the second almost, when the ground is clear from a fire and at its most fertile, it opens and drops its seeds. So, of course, the sand pine is always very successful at growing. This is a random type thing where, in fact, if there's clear ground, one will grow. That is very specific. Mother Nature said, okay, we're going to wait and not plant seeds till it is at the best possible time. And again, here you see another of the turkey oak starting to grow right here. We do have red mahogany in the park as well, another hardwood. This is the other oak that I was telling you about. You can see it all along here. This is called a laurel oak, and it looks like the leaf is like deformed, actually. Another gopher tortoise hole. There's probably just in this area around here about 30 gopher tortoises. It's hard to believe that they're endangered when you just walk around here for, a couple minutes and you go, boy, they're all over the place. Well, of course, we're going to now head back to the Kimbell Center. This is actually the end of the tour. Is there any questions? No questions. That's a good thing. Then I must have covered everything pretty well. Of course, I'll tell you, if you ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I make it up. And you don't know anyway, because you didn't know to begin with. If you really want to see something that's a spectacle, our Fire Fest. When we try to educate the public why we do prescribed burns, we have Department of Forestry with all their equipment. All our firefighting equipment is here. We also have a number of bouncy houses for the kids. We have a hay rides going on, swamp buggy rides, where they take you back through the woods, everything like that. And of course, from, I'm trying to think of bush wildlife, we'll be walking around with alligators, small ones, alligators and a number of owls, things like that, eagles. And you can not only see them, but you can ask a lot of questions of the individuals. Typically, I'm on the hay ride. At least I have been for the last 10 years, mainly because I do a lot with the burns and everything like that. Back many years ago, I used to do all of the logistics for Atlantic Ridge Preserve State Park for their burn program.
You get, from time to time, people bitten by snakes, venomous snakes?
You know, since I have been here, we have not. One of our classes that we give is what's called Snakes Alive. And it is how to be aware. You got to realize, number one, your venomous snakes, that venom is for them to get food. Mm-hmm. When they see you, their eyesight's very bad. They see a heat signature of you, actually, or they feel a vibration. We always tell everyone, when you are hiking in the woods, every once in a while, third, fourth step, drag your foot a little bit. They will get out of the way so you don't see them at all. That is a good thing. They don't want to bite you. That's the big thing. Everyone, I hear stories all the time when I'm giving the Snakes Alive presentation, that snake chased me. No. You were in his path of where he's, here's the woods behind you and you're between him and the woods. That's where he's going. 95% of all snake bites are what? The person was trying to kill him. The snake was defending itself. And of course, one thing that I make real clear to people about snakes, A, they don't want to bite you. Their venom is for their food. If they have to bite you, they may starve before they make enough venom to be able to get food, number one. They can't eat you, is a big thing, on that. So, of course, like I say, they don't want to bite you. They prefer to get out of the way of you. You're just in their path of where they need to go to get away.